So the story in the town of that family that did that thing that led to that result, that will be forgotten as this story, the romance of Boaz and Ruth, takes its place. They actually believe that God is a redeemer in a real, true sense, and therefore Boaz put his whole estate at risk to redeem Ruth.
Welcome to the God-Centered Life with Josh Moody Weekend Edition. We're in the book of Ruth, chapter 4. We're going to do part 2 of a study that we're calling Girl Power. Josh Moody is senior pastor of College Church in Wheaton, Illinois, and I'm Todd Vestede. We're glad that you're allowing us to spend some time with you here today. Josh, our opening teases the belief Boaz had in God as the ultimate redeemer. It sounds like you're saying that being extraordinary is only possible with faith?
Clearly, there are many people who don't believe in God at all, who do extraordinary things, extraordinary Olympic achievements and all the rest. But yeah, exactly. When it comes to what really matters in life, what's truly extraordinary, then the life that God gives us through grace that we receive by faith. And faith, remember, as we know, and we often say here, is a commitment. It's not simply, oh yeah, I believe that's true. It's I'm committing my life to God based upon His promises because of His sovereign power by His grace. And that kind of person really does have an extraordinary life. And the world around might say, it doesn't look that special to me, but when we read the annals of sacred history, we will see that the Boazes of this life are those who really do something quite extraordinary.
Well, let's wrap up this amazing story. We're in Ruth chapter 4. Here's Josh.
So friends, Ruth chapter 4, the conclusion to this wonderful romance. Well, here's the thing. I believe that every single one of us has the opportunity to be extraordinary. And it seems to me that sort of attitude infects even the church. There are the celebrity Christians, and we will have our own lists, either from the past or currently, Tim Keller and Mark Driscoll. And then there's the rest of us. Wrong. The way I read the Bible, I am as much made in the image of God as you and as anyone else. Seems to me that Boaz and Ruth were basically ordinary people, but then they became extraordinary. And let's look down and see how and why. First, what we see here is an extraordinary business arrangement. And this is the first half of the passage, down to verse 11 or 12 or so, or perhaps verse 10, but there's a business deal here. Boaz is not apparently going to win financially out of this deal. This is not a normal deal. The narrator is saying this is not business as usual. Any typical businessman would have walked away from this deal. Not Boaz. Well, second then, to an extraordinary family life. Now this, my friends, you look down from verse 10 or 11 on to the end of the passage, you'll see this extraordinary family life is introduced. Not for him mowing the grass 9 to 5, charity begins at home. No, his family is going to be like that of Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. Their family is going to have a massive impact on the whole people of God. They're not going to pull down the blinds, turn off the phones, and gather together in a little holy huddle and watch the rest of the world go by. They're not going to snuggle together under a blanket and watch reruns of the Cosby Show. They're going to build up the house of Israel. They are going to be the kind of family that you can build a church upon. In fact, they're going to be famous. Not ordinary anymore. Ephrathah, the region, the noble people, Bethlehem, the city, there they will have renown, it is predicted. In other words, people will not drive by their house not having any idea who lives there, whether they still live there or whether they've moved on by now. People will drive by and will say to themselves, oh, you know, that's the house of Boaz and Ruth. Why? Because of this extraordinary commitment to the extraordinary God. Their whole family is invested in building up God's people. It's an extraordinary family life. And because of that, they're going to overwrite bad patterns. So Tamar's infamous relationship with Judah, the last time this kind of levirate marriage was attempted, is now going to be forgotten, and what will be remembered is the romance of Boaz and Ruth. So the story in the town of that family that did that thing that led to that result, the kind of story that the local newspapers carry and the Christian bloggers blog, that will be forgotten as this story, the romance of Boaz and Ruth, takes now its place. Extraordinary business deal leading to an extraordinary family life. Why? People will say, hey, those guys, they actually meant it. They actually believe that God is a redeemer in a real, true sense, and therefore Boaz put his whole estate at risk to redeem Ruth. And wow, look at that family. They are building up the house of Israel. So if Boaz is extraordinary in his business dealing, now we see that Ruth is more so, or at least as much so, in her extraordinary family relationships. So you can see here, can't you, that she takes the child and she sort of lets Naomi have him on her lap in a symbolic gesture. And in a sense then, the women are saying, this is Naomi's child, and it is her redemption. And so strangely, as this extraordinary family life is introduced, the narrator begins to sort of mix his categories. You know, who is the Redeemer now? Is it Boaz? I thought it was Boaz. Or was it now Obed? Well, it's Obed because of Boaz. Jesse because of Obed because of Boaz. David because of Jesse because of Obed because of Boaz. And we know Jesus, the Redeemer to come, in this same extraordinary family. See, here's how this works, I think. If it's easy in suburbia for you and I to live ordinary Christian lives when it comes to business deals, it is perhaps even easier to do the same when it comes to family. When families up and down the country are falling apart, we want to invest in each other, and that's right and proper, and we should do that. But here we see a model of God calling us to live in our families for a higher purpose, not just building each other up, which is good and right and proper, but calling us to follow this model of investing in our families with a purpose of building up the whole house of Israel, the whole people of God. The child is Naomi's, not just Ruth's. Ruth was an extraordinary woman. This promised child she lays on her mother-in-law's lap. And so the extraordinary work of God is carried on to the praise of the extraordinary God through two very ordinary people, Boaz and Ruth, who seize the opportunity to believe in the extraordinary God and so live up to our human calling to be extraordinary as people made in the image of God. Not just atoms and cells and biological processes. Not just living for ourselves and making deals that will keep our pension in good shape. But living beyond the boundaries of the normal to live extraordinary lives for the extraordinary God. One of the virtues of reading history, I did history in my first degree, and so I like to read history still. It didn't put me off for life. One of the virtues of reading history is it can give you a bit of perspective on the present. You know, sometimes it feels that people think that Christianity began 5 years ago, or that human history started in 1984, or something like that, And if you ever have a chance to read histories of missionaries from 100 years or so ago, take that opportunity. College Church sends out hundreds of missionaries, or supported missionaries all the time, and each and every one of those missionaries makes significant sacrifices for the cause of the gospel through their life and in relation to their families. But in the 19th century, things were at a different level and commitment was measured by a different scale scale. When missionaries were first sent out to Africa, they were sent with the various expected farewells and provisions. As they got on their ship, a husband, a wife, sometimes perhaps children with them, they took with them, though, an unexpected addition. Often they went not just with warm wishes sent with them or with favored special preferences in terms of provisions, but also the unexpected addition for us of a casket, a coffin. The mortality rate of missionaries then was so high that it was viewed by the mission boards as simple common sense to send missionaries with their own coffin, just in case. Like today, missionaries take malaria tablets or duct tape or Ziploc bags. They took coffins. And so I wonder what sort of legacy our families will leave, and I wonder at what sort of extraordinary levels of commitment, letting a mother-in-law have Obed rest on her knee. What is required for the sort of gospel legacy here to take place? Perez came from Judah and Tamar, a notorious union. But that family tree, that stock, was redeemed through this extraordinary married couple, committed to each other by covenant, as we looked at last week, and by contentment, and therefore happiness in each other. And their extraordinary family life led to extraordinary gospel progress.
We'll pan from the historical to the more recent in just a moment. But first, wanted to take a second to let you know that we're glad you're joining us. If you're joining us for the first time, this is a program called God-Centered Life with Josh Moody. He's the senior pastor of College Church in Wheaton, Illinois. He's passionate about gospel-centered teaching. If you'd like to find out more after the program, feel free to swing by our website, godcenteredlife.org. Back into Ruth now. Here's Josh.
Now, I have to be honest and say I cannot say I've always managed to live up to this level of extraordinariness. I want to. Sometimes I think we've come at least close. When we first arrived in America, we came at what we took to be the call of God with a laptop, a printer, 3 suitcases, and nowhere to stay. We arrived at the week of Thanksgiving, still getting used to the American culture and not realizing this might be a busy time for the church. Fortunately, or shall we say, providentially, one family was out of town, and so we stayed in their apartment for a week while we began to look for another place to live. We called around various places at random, trying to find an apartment we could afford to rent. One of the people we called happened to have been a former member of the church, excited to hear that things were moving forward. They offered us a place to stay in their apartment rental unit a week early before it was ready. Otherwise, we might have been on the street. At least it felt like that. Oh, how little we trusted. That year, we had nothing to guarantee any kind of success. Unlike Boaz, we had no financial resources and nothing to pay our way, but enough to last 1 year for boom or bust. Without effectiveness, we would be going home after that year with nothing much to show for it. And, frankly, sometimes looking back, Rochelle and I wonder what we were doing. I also wonder whether I am doing it now. I wonder whether you are. What extraordinary family life, what extraordinary business deal. For the sake of the gospel, the good of the people of God is Christ calling you towards. There is ordinary Orpah who returned home to Moab to take the nice, safe, sensible option to look for a man among her own people. If she had gone for career advice, that was the advice she would have received. Go home, take things easy, find a man among your own tribe. Don't hang on to that Naomi woman any longer. The horse is bolted. Don't try to shut the stable door. It's time to start over and go back. And so Orpah was ordinary. Understandable, but ordinary. Ruth was extraordinary. Your people, my people. Your God, my God. Where you go, I will go. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. That is her mission statement, if you like, that runs throughout the book of Ruth. She makes an extraordinary commitment, and she follows through, even to laying the child on the lap of Naomi at the end. This other kinsman redeemer, the so-and-so, the friend, hey, you guy who is nameless and remains nameless in the story, who was also ordinary. He saw a business deal, he spied a good opportunity, but when he read the small print, he turned away. It didn't make business sense. But no one can do great or extraordinary things for God if he counts without God. You know, I would rather turn up to heaven as the plane crashes in the storm, knowing that I counted on the word of God and took the extraordinary risk, than get there and knew that I played it safe and lived an ordinary life below par, below what I am made to be in the image of God and recreated in the image of Christ, to be set apart for works that he has prepared in advance for me to walk in. He was ordinary. It's just an ordinary business deal for him. It didn't make sense, and he walked away from the deal. Boaz was extraordinary. Now, of course, he was in love with Ruth, which must have helped. But with Ruth came debt. And with her came a mother-in-law. With her came another man's name and honor and lineage and support to maintain that inheritance. He was putting the Mahlon name into the lineage of Perez. Hardly an idyllic beginning with Judah and Tamar, but because of Boaz's actions selflessly, his name, Boaz, is remembered as the one who redeemed Ruth, Naomi, and even Elimelech and Mahlon, and the whole line of Judah moves forward now with this genealogy, with its strange sort of leaps and bounds, until it arrives at the famous name of David that foreshadows the far more famous son of David, great David's greater son. It is extraordinary. Extraordinary Boaz, ordinary so-and-so. Extraordinary Ruth, ordinary Orpah. I wonder which we will be. Will we be an ordinary church? Will we be ordinary individuals? I'm not talking about great brains or great looks. One of the advantages of having a disabled son has been to see how God extraordinarily uses him. Again, history helps. It is not the great and the good who are extraordinary unless they make this extraordinary commitment. One book I read recently argued that only the elites could ever have any impact on society in any major way. Everyone else, everyone who did not either work at the high end of government or a CEO or something like that, a president of some internationally famous institution, an actor from Hollywood, anyone else outside the elites could work hard but really would never have any significant impact on the world. The rest, according to the book, the 99%, if you like, were doomed to mediocrity. And the book was arguing that therefore, if we Christians wanted to have an impact on the world, we needed to target this elite. Now, I'm not saying that God cannot use the elite. I know he can. I'm saying that what counts is whether we believe in the extraordinary God in a real, committed way, so that we will make this kind of extraordinary business decision and live this kind of extraordinary family life. See, the funny thing about this book that I read was that after the author had laid out his case at great length, in theory, he then turned to give examples of world-changing movements, and then, without a trace of irony or any apparent awareness of counterfactual, he started with a carpenter born in Bethlehem, a wandering nomad, a murderer, a prisoner in Egypt sold into slavery, any number of somewhat depressive prophets, a carpenter, a rather overly passionate, overeducated Pharisee, an African of Hippo, a medieval monk, a London preacher with no tertiary education who refused the opportunity to get it because he heard the text reverberate in his mind, "Seekest thou great things for thyself, seek them not," and so became the prince of preachers. A businessman, a pretty young Moabitess, a widow, a baby, an Obed, a David, a Messiah. Boaz, ordinary rich man. Ruth, ordinary impoverished woman. God, extraordinary.
That's Josh Moody, and this is The God-Centered Life. So, Josh, I'm sitting here listening to this story of faith and rescue, and I have this growing desire to be extraordinary. How do I pursue extraordinary in God's kingdom?
Yeah. In some ways, maybe it's being extraordinary by being an ordinary Christian and taking a step at a time, dreaming small, as sometimes I've heard, rather than massive, impossible dreams. Being faithful, doing what's in front of you, taking it a step at a time. So there's that side of things. I think on the other side, though, it is important to say, Lord, with the person that you've made me, with the gifts you've given me, what can I do most to advance the kingdom of God? And with God, as Jesus himself said, all things are possible. And so look at the way he's made you and say, how can I make an impact for Jesus? What does that mean? Does it mean repenting of something? Does it mean changing something? Does it mean investing in the kingdom? And here at God-Centered Life, we would love you to partner with us. Does it mean getting committed to your local church and actually getting involved there, truly leading a Bible study? Every year, I take time to look through my goals and make sure they are submitted to God's gospel, to God's goal for my life, set some specific plans, and then lay them before God, and of course revisit them, because only plans that are God-willing will actually take place. But I think that process is also important, Todd. Set a trajectory that can be extraordinary by faith in Christ.
All right, let me see if I got this. One way to be extraordinary is by being faithful in the ordinary.
Yeah, that would be a good way of summarizing it.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Josh. Appreciate that. Making our way through Ruth currently, and there are other Old Testament studies that are available on our website, godcenteredlife.org. There's also a contact page, and we would love to hear from you as to how these studies are impacting you, which ones are most meaningful. The web address, godcenteredlife.org, there's a contact page. Let us know where you're listening. That would mean so much. There's a mailing address if you'd like to drop us a line that way, too. Any way you choose to reach out, we would love to hear from you. Heading to the New Testament next time we get together, down to the brass tacks. We're looking at essentials.
Paul will mention various difficulties that were going on in the church in Ephesus, and what he calls Timothy to do is to stick to what is essential, namely the teaching of the Bible that focuses on the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the gospel.
heading into the book of 2 Timothy when we gather next time. Hope you're going to join us for that. GodCenteredLife.org has resources for you, and this is your warm invitation to join us right here next time we gather for the God-Centered Life with Josh Moody Weekend Edition.